Video games are almost always primarily interested in you having a good time and making sure you have all of the tools you need to accomplish that. So maybe that's why sometimes developers seem to want to let off steam by implementing cruel features designed to thwart you. While certainly not every entry on this list is a personal attack on the player, they certainly feel like they are. And in the time-consuming and sprawling genre of open-world games, there are as many avenues for developers to help you as there are ones to hurt you. Whether intentional or not, all of these entries stung in one way or another, so we've grouped them all together here so we can all have a grumble. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 cruel tricks video games played on open world players. Number 10. The castle is in another video game. CYBERPUNK 2077. This particular cruel trick may have become less prevalent in recent years with the advance of video game tech, creativity, and graphics enhancements, but it's still a pain to encounter whenever you do. Of course, the boundaries of an open world game have to be set somewhere, but sometimes it just really seems like an environmental artist got a little too excited that day and put something really enticing just outside the limits of the actual playable game world. So you'll be moseying along down the street, spot an interesting looking mountain or cabin, try to make your way there before either being knocked back by a prompt or an invisible wall letting you know that particular bit is not part of the video game. That then leaves disappointed gamers wondering if said bit will be included as DLC or if it's just a particularly enticing but futile bit of scenery outside the game world perimeter. Plenty of open world games do this, but a good recent example is in CYBERPUNK 2077, where you might have spotted a very enticing bit of scenery in the distance, specifically a rocket ship that appears to be taking off. If you're anything like me, you might have found yourself jumping into the water and swimming towards that rocket ship for like 30-40 minutes of time, only to realize it's actually inaccessible. And no, I'm not salty about that huge waste of time at all. Number 9. Failing side quests due to main story progression. Dying Light 2. Loads of sprawling open-world RPGs are culprits of secretly gating you out of side quests if you head too far down the main path. The issue here is when there's so much side content, much of which isn't signposted, and the player in question happens to be a completionist who hates the idea of missing anything at all. So me, and you if you relate to that last bit. In open world games where the things you do in the main quest take you to new locations, permanently alter old ones, or might even lead to the deaths of important characters, many of us have trained ourselves to do all the side stuff first before we make too much headway into the main missions. In Dying Light 2, for instance, there are multiple side missions you can miss out on or fail entirely if you opt to take on the main story mission first. Never be fooled into thinking just because this is an open world game with a whole buffet of different things to do and you can choose to do any of them you want that you won't be punished for doing things out of order. Unless you're following a guide, it's very easy to accidentally progress too far and lock yourself out of side content that could only trigger in certain earlier world states. And checking your journal only to see some of your quests have mysteriously disappeared is a pretty crappy feeling. It's probably fine if you're not a crazy completionist, but if you are, we can absolutely classify this one as a cruel trick. Number 8. Psychic Guards, The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. The hero of Kvatch works hard, but it's arguable that the guards of Cyrodiil work even harder because boy does word spread like wildfire among the making sure you don't violate the law community. Someone needs to investigate the crime reporting systems between Oblivion guards because they are wildly effective. Kill off a dude in the middle of nowhere and the expert network of law enforcement in Cyrodiil ensures that each and every soldier will know of your crimes, pursue you relentlessly, and run right up to you if you dare enter their vicinity, letting you know you've been placed under arrest. Psychic guards can be found in Assassin's Creed games, and Grand Theft Auto has its own version of these dudes in their psychic police, though I suppose at least they have radios. Better pay the court a fine or serve your sentence because you are not getting away from these guys. Number 7. This specific quest is on a timer. Mass Effect 2. Open world games are a buffet of quests, side activities, repeating gigs, NPCs to meet, you name it, there's tons to do. So it makes sense that almost always, unless otherwise specified, you can expect that you're not on a timer to do any of these things. Unless there's the urgency of a Majora's Mask style timer ticking, you can safely assume that you tackle things as you like and when you like. That is why it is especially cruel when there's a specific mission or event that does require you to complete it in a timely manner, particularly when the whole rest of the game has not worked that way. The most egregious example of this is probably Mass Effect 2's suicide mission, where you can actually get a lot of the crew killed by taking too long to kick off this last stand main mission. As soon as you finish off the Reaper IFF mission, you'll be on a hidden timer to get your ass in gear and go through the Omega-4 relay to save your crew. Decide to do a few more missions beforehand and you'll find even more of your crew have died while you were dawdling. Harsh. Number 6. Killing off your ride or die. Cyberpunk 2077. One of the nastiest things an open world video game can do to you is help you bond with a charismatic, kind, or delightful companion, only to unceremoniously kill them off. Final Fantasy and Cyberpunk 2077 are both culprits of this particular entry, as they both use excellent writing to endear you to a character that you'd assume you'd never be saying goodbye to, only to flip the switch on you in the cruelest of ways. Okay, now there are spoilers for Cyberpunk in this next bit, so if for some reason you don't want those, come meet us at the next entry. This one was especially puzzling as the character in question, Jackie Wells, featured in all of the marketing material for the game, and seemed like your ride or die bestie, only to be killed off relatively early in the game. This has ongoing implications for V, who spends a lot of the game processing Jackie's death as he continues to come up in her journey. Number 5. Don't Fall In. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. As you'd expect, there are plenty of open world games that feature a ton of different biomes, and some of these are huge bodies of water. Occasionally you won't be able to get in at all, but in games like The Witcher 3, your bigger problem is often getting out. A particularly cruel trick here is in designing a game with a superpowered mutant protagonist who has an enormous amount of trouble escaping water without a steady incline akin to the accessibility ramp of your local pool. Any Witcher player can probably tell you stories about tumbling into water from a not beach and being unable to escape for some time. This is all the more infuriating when you're hustling about trying to get smugglers' caches or a bunch of sirens have just sunk your boat, so you're trying to get to the closest shore to dry off and nurse what's left of your pride. Number 4. Patches. Dark Souls. This entry is just patches. Patches are the cruel trick that's played on you in Dark Souls. While it's lovely to meet one of the few creatures in this horrorscape that aren't trying to claw you to death immediately upon seeing you, patches may as well be, because this tricksy guy tries to kill you a ton by convincing you to fall into or off dangerous terrain, and then convince you he was just playing, begs your forgiveness, and has the gall to ask if you're still mates. Of course, friends are hard to come by in Lordran, so you'll probably give him a pass, even though he is also very much trying to kill you too, just in a less obvious way. In case you did take a shine to the trickster, you'll be happy to hear there are iterations of him in every single Soulsborne game, right up to and including Elden Ring, where, you guessed it, he's up to shenanigans. Number 3. Your failures caught in slow-mo. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I'm sure Bethesda only meant well when they let you see your kills in awesome slow motion animation, except that slow motion isn't no motion. So say you're attacking with a bow and arrow or a similarly small projectile, and there's a chance you're in a sick zoomed in cutscene just to watch yourself miss. Skyrim's arrows so often have a mind of their own, even the game doesn't seem to be aware of the fact that you can miss. While this one is absolutely cruel, it's probably due to a programming failure and not the devs sitting around wanting to make you look like a dummy. This cruel trick gets even nastier and, let's face it, more entertaining, because maxing out the archery tree in Skyrim will grant you the bullseye skill, which can give you a chance to paralyze enemies with your shots. That sounds all well and good, except upon getting paralyzed they fall to the ground, meaning they've moved position after the skill has been triggered, meaning the arrow you just shot off right at their brain place has now sailed right over the top of them. Not a waste of skill points at all. Number 2. Gear up, get captured anyway. Far Cry 5. Plenty of games commit this cardinal sin where they set up the imminent engagement with a pile of foreshadowing, that as you understanding you're really gonna have to pull out all the stops to prepare for this one. So you pop your buffs, use your best consumables, buy that gear you've been eyeing off, and steel yourself for what's to come. And that's where you find out very quickly that this wasn't going to be a real battle at all, and it was instead a scripted fail state you were never intended to be able to beat. This happens repeatedly in Far Cry 5, where you'd be forgiven for assuming you can win the encounter that tells you to avoid getting hit by the hallucinogenic bliss bullets so as not to get kidnapped. But try as you might, any damage you take during or even after this encounter will initiate the kidnapping cutscene. Even if you take out every single enemy and don't take a blip of damage in the entire encounter, the scripted cutscene will still run telling you you got kidnapped. Whether these scripted failures kick you to a game over screen or progress the narrative, as is the case in Far Cry 5, it's not really relevant to how burned you'll feel by the amount of time and money you sunk into preparation for a battle that didn't even get off the ground. Number 1, tempting you with a shortcut, Death Stranding. Everyone will have a different example of an open world game that tempted them with a shortcut that they decided to take and then deeply regretted 15 to 25 to 60 minutes later when they found themselves jammed on the side of an almost entirely vertical mountain, knowing that they would have been at their location by now if they just followed the GPS. But we've all done it. You set your next location on the map, and then when you load back in, you see that the GPS coordinates are sending you in the opposite direction of where you want to go. So you tell yourself, okay, well, the fastest way between 2 points is just to go in a straight line, and you set off as such. Even if there's a mountain in the way, or a barricade, or a town, or a body of water. Perhaps the most brutal punisher of this mentality is Death Stranding, where I vividly remember spending hours of my life trying to take what I had thought to be a shortcut, only to find myself out of ropes and ladders halfway up a waterfall. In a game with arduous traversal mechanics, you'd be forgiven for trying to get somewhere more directly. But in Death Stranding, a shorter route almost always means a practically impossible one, which you'll realize for yourself when all your cargo is destroyed and you're stuck in a nasty spot of timefall. Okay, I'm gonna level with you. Admittedly, this one is kind of on us and our hubris, but I know so many of us have lost so much time to trying to do this that let's just go ahead and agree it's the cruelest trick a video game has played on any of us. That's the end of our list, but do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other especially cruel tricks that video games have played on you. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.